More than 3 decades after Groundhog Day became a cult classic, Bill Murray still refuses to watch one specific scene, and it's not for the reason fans might expect. While the film is beloved for its humor and heart, there's a hidden moment that brings back memories Murray can't bear to relive. Behind the laughs and looping timelines was a deeply strained production filled with tension, personal conflict, and emotional exhaustion. For Murray, that one scene isn't just part of a movie, it's a snapshot of real pain. And to this day, he won't go near it, not even once. The scene that Murray refuses to rewatch. Bill Murray has described Groundhog Day as possibly the best work I've ever done. Yet he admits there's one scene he can't bear to watch again. The eye-level shot of Phil Connors standing over a frozen lake after an attempted suicide seems harmless, hero in despair. But for Murray, it's loaded with personal echoes. Filmed during his messy divorce in 1992, Murray has said, "I can't watch it." The cinematic moment is entangled with real emotional pain. Audiences remember it as tragicomic poetry. Murray lives it as residue. One night on set, he reportedly walked off a take, tears blurring the cold air. He joked he felt the film in his bones, but it was more literal than he meant. That scene isn't dramatic art for Murray. It's emotional truth, salvaged under duress. For the public, it's character evolution. For Murray, it's a private scar thrust into the open. Viewers latch on to the poignancy. Murray seeks to protect himself. He said, "It's too much," emphasizing the emotional cost. It's rare for an actor to declare a finished film too much, but Murray does exactly that with this one scene. The lasting impact is undeniable. The film endures. Murray endures. But some parts of our past should stay in archives, unseen. That scene isn't just on film. It's in Murray's mind. He gave audiences vulnerability, but took it away from himself. And so it remains unwatched. Now that we've seen how deeply personal that avoided scene is for Murray, we need to unpack what fueled it. It grew in the crucible of a creative clash between Bill Murray's hunger for emotional depth and Harold Ramis's comedic instincts. That conflict shaped not only the tone of the film, but the emotional toll it took on both men. In Point 2, we'll dive into their philosophical tug-of-war and how it brought this unforgettable moment to life. Creative conflict that birthed intensity. The scene's gravity can't be separated from the intense creative clash between Bill Murray and director Harold Ramis. Murray pushed for emotional honesty and philosophical depth, treating the time loop as a spiritual rebirth. Ramis wanted a familiar comedic rhythm to keep audiences engaged, shaped the film's soul. They went through countless rewrites. Murray would push the script towards spiritual reflection. Ramis would reel it back to comedic timing. Both held influence, Murray's dramatic gut instinct versus Ramis's comedic structure, but neither would surrender. The compromise they struck created not just a movie, it created something deeply felt. That friction bore fruit. Ramis later told interviewers that Murray elevated the emotional weight of the film. Yet for Murray, that named shift was costly. That scene, where Phil hits personal rock bottom, zooms in on the creative bleeding they both put on display. What audiences see is theatrical catharsis. Murray sees the emotional cost. Ramis sees the artistic breakthrough. Their energies collided into that breakdown, a raw hurt captured in cinematic form. And for Murray, the memory lives in the performance more than on tape. He gave everything to make meaning real. With consequences, he still avoids. We've gone from emotional scar to creative battlefield. But what made the scene sear into memory wasn't only philosophy, it was physical cold and emotional exhaustion on set. In Point 3, we'll explore how the grueling 1992 winter location shoot, interpersonal tension, and personal turmoil overlapped to make this scene more than an act. It became an emotional breakdown in real life. Cold set, emotional breakdown, hidden cost. The infamous scene was shot during a frigid January 1992 in Illinois, under real winter. Night shoots left cast and crew numb. Every exhalation hung in the air. On top of that, Murray, separated from his spouse, was navigating personal dissolution. The cold and emotional turmoil merged into a potent mix. Set tensions soared. Crew recall arguments between Murray and Ramis, maybe even a collar grab. Murray had to perform as despair-stricken Phil in frozen stillness under a sky heavy with cold. It wasn't just acting, it was emotional exposure captured unblinking. Someone recalled Murray cracking during a take. That wasn't scripted sadness, that was personal grief bleeding through character. It became reactor-level intensity, a mix of thesis and therapy. Murray later admitted he felt small, exposed, and crew respect grew, but empathy did more. They felt his pain. For viewers, the scene is key character growth. For Murray, it's emotional landmine. It's forever etched in his memory. To replay it would be to reopen wounds in real time. It's one thing to watch a performance, it's another to relive your own brokenness behind it. And for Murray, that's why the scene remains unwatched, a memory too raw to recreate. We've traced the emotional wound to a creative spark and a fraught set. Next, we'll reveal how that pressure fractured not just that moment, but the relationship between Murray and Ramis. Though the film became a cherished classic, the two men didn't speak for 2 decades. In Point 4, we'll explore that silence and how creative fallout impacts lives behind the camera. Fallout between Murray and Ramis. After Groundhog Day wrapped in 1992, the creative tension didn't just vanish. Bill Murray and Harold Ramis, who'd once been close collaborators, didn't speak for nearly 20 years, a deep rift shrouded in silence. Their friendship fractured, but the bond that fueled Groundhog Day dissolved in the aftermath. The irony? The film succeeded wildly. Library of Congress, 2006, Oscar buzz. But behind scenes was an emotional smokescreen. Murray went on to other roles. Ramis filmed Analyze This, 1999, among others. They avoided direct contact, solidarity replaced with polite distance. Two creative minds who made magic stayed not quite friends. Murray later reflected, "We never talked," acknowledging the fracture. He recognized the payoff, the film's emotional impact, but not without cost. The tension that made the story personal also made their relationship fall apart. The separation marked the end of an era. Their connection would remain fractured until Ramis's death in 2014. Despite this silence, fans never forgot their partnership. Interest in them reuniting peaked at the 2019 Oscars sketch and a 2021 Super Bowl commercial. Still, the emotional cost remains. Murray may continue honoring the film, but when it comes to their friendship, he carries what he calls unfinished business. So far, we've covered emotional scars, creative rifts, and fractured bonds. But here's what truly resonates. Groundhog Day wasn't just a cultural moment. It shaped Murray's emotional landscape. In Point 5, we'll examine how the film's success, fan obsession, and personal reactions affected Murray's perception of his work. Film success and emotional repercussions. Groundhog Day achieved legendary status. By 2006, it entered the Library of Congress, a cultural artifact. Fans dissect every layer. Murals, podcasts, and academic papers analyzed Phil's journey as symbolic rebirth and purpose. Murray benefited financially and reputation-wise, yet was wary of the spotlight that followed. He received praise and awards, but also intrusive questions. Interviewers pressed him, asking if he still related to the hurt scene. Each mention triggered attention, not promotional drama, but personal unease. His performance drew acclaim, yet re-exposure meant reliving pain. He had proven his emotional depth, but the cost weighed heavy. Despite fan love, Murray seemed uncomfortable. He joked, "He's glad my Netflix credit keeps working," but he deflected when asked about Groundhog Day. Insiders say he'd smile politely, then change the subject. The film gifted him acclaim, but pinned him to emotional vulnerability he couldn't re-enter. This imbalance, external fandom versus internal fatigue, helped shape Murray's reaction. He gave audiences catharsis, yet carried scars. As the film remained more beloved, his resistance grew. That left him publicly guarded, yet privately peeled open. It's a tension that underscores why he refuses to revisit that fainting moment. As Point 5 shows, success didn't heal. It amplified the emotional tremor. The next step is to view how Murray chose to move forward in life and career. In Point 6, we look at his subsequent path and how that one anguished moment shaped his future decisions and public presence. Murray's selective path and emotional preservation. After Groundhog Day, Bill Murray chose roles that let him avoid raw emotional territory. He leaned back into comedy, Ghostbusters 2, 1989, Charlie's Angles, 2000, Lost in Translation, 2003, but steered clear of vulnerability to that degree. He still embraced depth, but on his terms. In interviews, Murray kept personal boundaries firm. Asked about 92, he'd change the subject. On stage, he'd riff about coffee or ice, never about that lake. Interviews remained surface level. "I prefer to move forward," he'd joke. That decision to compartmentalize meant he remained authentic but self-protective. He even let writers and comedians loop his image into myth. His mystique grew. Unpredictable appearances, refusal to rewatch classic work. Murray became the enigma behind the icon. Critics and fans framed him as mysterious, but at heart, it was self-care. He refused to reduce his work to unguarded vulnerability. This strategy allowed Murray to stay creative while protecting his emotional core. By channeling his energy into new comedic directions, he found balance. He never forgave or forgot, but chose not to relive. It's the reason Groundhog Day endures without defining him utterly. Having followed Murray's journey through emotional break, creative fallout, fame, and strategic growth, we arrive at the next phase, moving from protection into a kind of reconciliation. In Point 7, we'll explore how Murray and Ramis found lines of friendship again, rare appearances, shared comics, and how healing began even if wounds stayed beneath the surface. Reconciliation sparks. After nearly a 20-year freeze, Murray and Ramis began to thaw around 2013 during an SNL 40th anniversary celebration. The nostalgia-laced sketch brought them back on stage as Wayne and Garth, reconnecting through humor. In that moment, they both softened. Murray said it felt like coming full circle and admitted they had begun to reconnect. Even if piecemeal, it worked. Their next public appearance together came in 2019 when they reprised their iconic duo for the Oscars opening. Audience members saw genuine camaraderie, not just imposed nostalgia. For Murray, it was a chance to honor their shared history. For Ramis, to reclaim creative legacy. They still avoided emotional subject matter, but laughter replaced awkwardness. In 2021, the duo surfaced again in a playful Super Bowl ad for Uber Eats, alongside Cardi B. Their banter came naturally, and they seemed genuinely content on screen. These reunions implied a rebuilt foundation, one based on mutual respect and shared history, not buried resentments. They'd found a way to keep the connection, even if the deepest wounds remained. Even after reconciling publicly, Murray never revisited that moment he avoids. He protected the emotional scar. The brief glimpses of friendship weren't a cure. They were a compromise. A shared joke instead of a private wound. The film remains a high point. The lake scene remains buried. But where silence reigned, they discovered cautious respect. With the shadow lifted enough for occasional warmth, Murray and Ramis balanced their bond, publicly light-hearted, privately cautious. But what happened next? In Point 8, we explore the final chapter. Ramis's death in 2014, Murray's emotional reflection, and how losing his friend shaped the legacy and the place of that scene. Loss, reflection, and lingering echoes. Harold Ramis passed unexpectedly in February 2014, and Bill Murray responded with heartfelt tribute. He said, "I lost a great friend," reflecting the depth of their shared creative journey. Their public distance had softened, but Ramis's death made that gulf irreparable. The pause became permanent. For Murray, it was a moment of true finality, a recognition that some bridges, once rebuilt, could crumble again. In interviews following Ramis's funeral, Murray spoke with rare emotion. He reflected on their intense partnership, comedic highs, philosophical lows, and that mutual growth which forged Groundhog Day. When he mentioned that one scene he refuses to see again, he added weight with sorrow, acknowledging pain wasn't petty, but elemental to their bones. It remained a wound he chose to preserve. With Ramis gone, Murray carried the sentimental legacy alone. The film became more than a duo's triumph. It became Murray's personal monument. That avoided scene turned into both a tribute and a boundary. It belonged to both their histories, but Murray held on to it alone. It defined part of his grief, not just their creative clash. Still, as Murray continues to speak subtly about Groundhog Day, that avoided scene remains peripheral. It's never been erased. It's just not part of the narrative he chooses to surface. Like a protected relic in a museum, it rests behind glass, accessible but untouchable. Now that we've examined reconciliation and finality, there's one final dimension to reveal. How that scene, the silence around it, shaped Murray's enduring public identity. In Point 9, we look at the mythos that grew around him, the enigmatic perfection, and how audiences view him now. The mythic Murray. Bill Murray's refusal to revisit one scene helped craft the enigma fans now adore. He doesn't give interviews about Groundhog Day. He shows up at events unannounced, cracking jokes or playing golf. That unpredictability built his mythic image, not aloof, but self-contained. The scene he avoids added mystique. If his artistry came at a cost, why reopen it? He won acclaim and aura in equal measure. In interviews, Murray speaks lightly about the film's legacy. It feels good that people connect, but he maintains distance from emotional detail. This boundary shapes his persona, profound yet protected. Murray shows us a masterclass in self-care, artistic risk balanced by emotional armor. That lake moment became the scar he won't relive, not out of avoidance, but preservation. Critics and fans now log emotional pilgrimages around Groundhog Day. They dissect every line and theme, redemption, time, self-growth. Yet Murray always steps aside, letting the film survive on its own. That rare restraint adds weight. His creative choices gain depth when the person behind them draws a line in the snow and refuses to cross. In 2025, that scene still stands unwatched, publicly sacred, privately sealed. Bill Murray's life and legend thrive because he left that wound behind. He proves that even when a moment shapes your legacy, you don't have to live there forever. With that final look at how Murray's choices shaped his public identity, we've traced a complete arc, from personal pain to guarded legend. He turned vulnerability into mystery, creative friction into timeless art, and emotional fault lines into enduring persona. Let's now tie it all together with a strong conclusion that reflects the journey, the cost, and the legacy this one scene carries. For a film, a friendship, and an actor who refuses to let go. Why some scenes leave wounds. Actors often say acting is truth, but what happens when truth hurts too much? Murray's refusal to rewatch that pivotal scene underscores how emotional exposure can scar. In the solitude after shooting Wrapped, he reflected on the cost. For viewers, Phil's pain becomes cinematic poetry. For Murray, it remains a living hurt rooted in personal history. That unrealized intimacy marks the heart of Groundhog Day's power. But not every memory is safe to reopen. Murray showed that creative investment can demand emotional sacrifice. The lake scene, the moment of utter despair, became both his best work and his most guarded memory. He carried it forward, not out of vanity, but survival. By refusing to relive the moment, Murray draws a line between performance and life. It shows a rare maturity in show business. Vulnerability should be given, but not at the cost of self. The world got meaning and humor. Murray kept something in the vault. Audiences receive triumph, but the artist retains privacy. In that single moment, Groundhog Day and Bill Murray achieve something rare, creating universal resonance while preserving deeply personal boundaries. That dichotomy makes the film timeless, and Murray teaches us that legends need secrets, not spectacles. Now that we've seen the emotional stakes of scene selection, let's take a broader view. In Point 11, we'll analyze how Murray's lake scene has been referenced culturally, from memes and academic papers to labyrinthine fan theories, and how public fascination coexists with an actor's quiet refusal. A creative myth that's both shared and sealed by Murray's own choice, making the film's legacy richer and more mysterious. Lake scene in culture and scholarship. That avoided moment has become legendary. Film scholars dissect it as existential turning point. Authors compare it to spiritual rebirth rituals. Reddit threads debate whether Phil truly dies. When academics teach Groundhog Day, they highlight that shot, Phil's despair, as the moment of reckoning. Audiences analyze, synthesize, theorize, but Murray keeps his silence. Film clips routinely include that emotional collapse. YouTube edits on Phil's suicide alternative attract millions of views. Cinema classes place it beside Dante's Dark Forest in thematic depth. Yet for Murray, these analyses land without context. He penned the piece, released it, and then stepped back. That lake scene has also inspired memes, shimmering ice visuals, layers of existential dread in GIF form. It's a joke among youth. Phil really hit rock bottom, while older audiences sigh knowingly. And yet, everywhere it appears, Murray stays quiet. That silence only amplifies its resonant weight. So the scene transforms from personal wound to cultural artifact, an emotional touchstone, and Murray's distance becomes part of its power. The missing perspective, the one person who lived the pain, adds a compelling mystery. The film becomes canonical, and the actor untouchable. Having mapped out how that scene echoes in culture and academia, it's time to explore its emotional aftermath. In Point 12, we'll explore how other actors and directors involved in Groundhog Day remember it, how they've preserved it, processed it, and interpreted its emotional gravity years later when Murray stayed silent. Co-stars and crew, what they say. Colleague Andy McDowell recalls the lake sequence as intense and fragile. She remembers Murray slipping into character, beyond his usual guarded persona. Yet, the crew sensed something deeper. Camera operators later admitted they saw genuine tears. Their reflections echo. That wasn't just acting, it was a lived moment. Harold Ramis's production notes described an energy shift during the take. He praised Murray's honesty in early drafts, but warned that it hurt. Ramis told Murray, "You gave too much." That level of vulnerability often breaks sets, but here it produced artistry. He admired it, but also recognized its emotional price. Crew members recount cleaning ice from Murray's coat, consoling him with warm blankets. Extras reported the energy on set shifted. Everyone felt it. That human aftershock stayed with them long after filming ended. For technical staff, editing that shot became less of a task and more of a respect ritual. Years later, McDowell still brings it up with reverence. "It set the tone," she says. The scene anchored the film emotionally, giving it philosophical weight. And yet, Murray declined to revisit it. His co-workers accepted that boundary. They honor the scene publicly. He honors it personally. Groundhog Day team members hold that scene in collective esteem, while Murray holds it in personal lockbox. Now tying Murray's artistic sacrifice to modern lessons on vulnerability and craft. We'll consider whether his choice tells us something vital about art, legacy, and emotional survival. Lessons from the lake. There's power in artistic risk. Groundhog Day achieved cultural immortality in part because Murray went there, emotionally, spiritually. But he also stepped back. That teaches a crucial lesson. Artistry doesn't require living in pain forever. You can create vulnerability and then preserve your own well-being. Creators watch this story to understand balance. Murray refused to rewatch, but he delivered greatness. He showed that emotional honesty can exist concurrently with emotional care. That boundary between performance and remembrance lets art thrive without consuming its maker. For fans, the takeaway is humility. Murray gave us profound beauty, then taught us to respect its source. He reminds creators, there is dignity in saying, "This I create, but this I keep." Vulnerability need not equal exposure. We can share meaning while protecting ourselves. In the end, that one avoided scene stands for what Groundhog Day is: hope, despair, endurance, and an artist's boundary that defines a legend. Murray reminds us that sometimes the deepest mark we leave is not the one we revisit. In the end, Groundhog Day is not just a film about repetition, it's a film about transformation. And ironically, for Bill Murray, the movie demanded a transformation of its own. Not just of a character, but of a man struggling through a divorce, wrestling with creative control, and navigating a collapsing friendship with director Harold Ramis. The pain wasn't just on screen, it was real and still unresolved, even after all these years. Murray's refusal to revisit that one particular scene speaks volumes. Sometimes, what we leave unwatched tells us more than what we celebrate. That moment is etched not just in film, but in the emotional architecture of Murray's memory. As much as fans adore Groundhog Day for its humor and heart, for Murray, it represents a deeply personal battle, too painful to relive, even in retrospect. Yet, despite the hurt, he's never disowned the film. Quite the opposite. He's acknowledged its brilliance, its meaning, its legacy. He even reconciled with Ramis before the director's death, an act that proved forgiveness is possible, even if the wounds never fully heal. That's the paradox of Groundhog Day, a story about breaking out of loops, even as its star chooses to keep one emotional loop closed forever. In that silence, there's respect. In that absence, there's reverence, and in that avoided scene, there's a reminder. Some performances demand more than talent. They demand your soul. And sometimes, looking back means reliving it all. For Bill Murray, the choice not to watch isn't a denial of the film's greatness. It's a quiet truth about the cost of creating something timeless.